Okay, so welcome everyone. And in our previous class, we tried to understand Docker, the problems that Docker solves, and we also tried to understand images and containers. So in today's class, we will be introducing NestJS. We will learn how to build server-side applications with NestJS. So we'll make this introduction very interactive and to enable us understand what NestJS is all about and the problem it solves. So NestJS is quite different from ExpressJS. ExpressJS uses more of functions, while NestJS uses classes. Okay, so let's dive in. So in today's class, our aims and objectives are to introduce NestJS, to understand NestJS controllers, to understand providers, modules, middle, and exception filters in NestJS, if time permits. So without wasting much time, we jump to introduction. So what is NestJS? Okay, so I think we should just head over to the NestJS docs already. NestJS, okay, a progressive Node.js framework, documentation. Okay, so let me zoom in. Okay, here's the introduction. So the introduction here says NestJS is a framework for building efficient and scalable Node.js server-side applications. Okay, it uses progressive JavaScript and is built with and fully support TypeScript. And it still enables developers to code in pure JavaScript and combines elements of object-oriented programming, functional programming, and functional reactive programming. So under the hood, NestJS makes use of robust HTTP server frameworks like Express. This is a default framework NestJS uses. And optionally can be configured to use Fastify as well. So I'm not a fan of Fastify. I've never used it. I've never even read their docs. So what I only use Express, Nest, and on Node.js. So thank God that Express is the default HTTP server framework that NestJS uses. So Nest provides a level of abstraction above these common NestJS frameworks like Express, and Fastify, but also exposes their API directly to the developer. So this gives developers the freedom to use the myriad of third-party modules which are available for the underlying platform. Okay, so we get to understand this as we move on. So what's the philosophy behind NestJS? So this is, they'll say, blah, 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 this and that, backend, giving rise to awesome projects like Angular, React, and Vue, which improve developer productivity to enable and all of that. So however, plenty of Swap library helps and tools exist, Node.js, and they solve many problems to do. So what they're trying to say is the architecture behind this. Net provide an out-of-the-box application architecture which allowed developers and teams to create highly testable, scalable, loosely coupled, and then easily maintainable applications. So the architecture is heavily inspired by Angular. Okay. So yes, Nest architecture is inspired by Angular because Angular uses DI, dependency injection as well. So it's inspired by Angular and all of that. So in ExpressJS, if you want to build an application, there are many ways you can set up your application structure. There are many ways you can go about that, the architecture and the structure of your application. It depends on what you want. You can use classes or you can use functions. But then NestJS simplifies that for us. In Express.js, you have to do that manually and then set everything up by yourself. But in NestJS, everything is being simplified. So you don't have to go around setting it up by yourself. All you need to do is just install the NestJS CLI and then scaffold your project and then get it moving. Okay, so what next do we have? We've looked at what NestJS is all about. It's used for building server-side applications, and it simplifies all of this setting up scaffolding your application, setting up the architecture and all of that. And it heavily relies on dependency injection. And then if you don't really understand what dependency injection is, I will try to explain in this class as we move on. So now it's time to install NestJS. No. Okay, so the installation, okay, you can clone this repo as a starter project, or you can basically install the clean. Here we have npm IG. So you can basically come here and then install the NestJS command line interface. So that's a npm. Okay, I'm on a Mac. So if I say npm I-g, that's it, at nest/cli. If I hit enter, I will get an error. Note that you can also install from it's not in this get. Okay, am I using npm? Okay, yes, the nest. Okay, NestJS/CLI. So NestJS/CLI. And I will still get an error. And the reason why is because I am not using sudo to give me admin privileges. I'm not using sudo. Okay, so why is it taking time? I already have it installed, but I just wanted to, okay, the error. The operation was rejected by your operating system. It is likely you do not have the permissions to access this file or as a current user, yes. So if I do sudo npm and then it will complete for me because I've already installed this. And if I hit enter, it will ask for my password and I will enter my password and hit enter again. Then the NestJS command line interface will be installed on my machine. I already have it installed, so it shouldn't take much time. Yes, it shouldn't take much time. Okay. So now we have changed 260 packages in 15 seconds. 53 packages are looking for funding and all of that. So I've installed the NestJS CLI. So now it's time to create our application. The application we'll be using to learn Nest. So let's just open here. We'll come over here. Then we'll make a new file. Or basically, you can say make a directory of and then we say 10 NestJS. Then we can cd NestJS. Okay, we can cd NestJS. Okay, now we are in basically list the files and directories, and there's nothing inside. So now we want to create a new project inside of this 10 NestJS. So let's look at the command. The command is nest new and then the project name. So we already have a project name here, 10 NestJS. So we say nest new, and then we say in the current directory, create the project inside of this. We don't want to create another folder inside of this folder, just create it inside. Then we hit enter. So now next we scaffold the project for us. It's asking which package manager would you love to use? Look at the heart emoji here. The heart emoji. Which package manager would you love to use? And then we'll be using npm. Okay, so it has created all of these for us, and then it's also installing. So we have to wait for it to install. And while we are waiting, let's head over back to the docs. And here he's a hint to create a TypeScript project with stricter feature set, pass the dash strict flag to the next new command. Okay, we didn't do that. We don't want to do that. So if you like to clone, we don't want to clone the repo. And if you like, you can install everything manually. So we have the next JS core, the NestJS common, and then the RxJS, and the reflect metadata. Okay, so we try to explain this thing after we've installed everything. We'll try to explain what all of these packages are. But the NestJS core is a core library for NestJS that you can use to build your server-side applications. And then the NestJS common are the common utilities, utility functions or classes that you can share within your application in NestJS. And then we have the RxJS and then the reflect metadata, which we explain in just a bit. Okay, so are we done installing? Oh, we're still installing, it's taking time. Okay, let's head over to first steps. So you must have a NodeJS greater than or version 16 installed on your machine. And then we've created, so this is the next folder structure. So after we've created after everything is being installed, okay, so everything is installed and then we're good to go. So let's clear our terminal, Command B, and then we'll have this open. So if you come over to our NestJS application, we have some folders and files here. So this is specific to NestJS. This is the NestJS CLI.json. And then we have some things here, of which I don't know. This is referencing JSON schema.org, NestCli, and then the NestJS schematics. The root is the source here can execute command, and then all of that. This related to NestJS CLI. Then we have the package JSON and the package log JSON, of which we know what they already mean. Then we have some commands in the package JSON. So the license here is unlicensed. So this is basically unlicensed. Then we have the description here. We can say next notes. And the author here is, let's say, KodeCamp, like this. Okay, so now we have, this is private true. This cannot be published. This private true simply means it's a private package. It cannot be published to NPM. So if you want to publish it to NPM, make it public, you change this to false, or you completely remove this. So we have some scripts here. Nest build. So if you run nest build, it will build and bundle your application and then make it ready for deployment in a production environment. Then we have format. You can basically format your application. You can run prettier so that prettier can format the file to your application. If you want to start your application in production environment, you can say nest start. Or if you want to start it in a development environment, you say start dev, so it can watch for changes in your project, so that anytime there is a change, your application will restart. So we have start debug. So it will start your application in debug mode. Then start prod. Okay, this is to start it in production. This is basically to start it in development, but it will not watch for changes. This is to start it in production. Then this is basically to link your application using ESLint. This one is test, just, and then test watch, just watch. So they've already included just automatically. So just is a default testing library, and they've already included it here. So test E2E here is still references just test E2E JSON and all of that. So we have dependencies. We have next common, next core, which I've already explained. These are used by Next under the hood to scaffold all of this and then allow us to build our server-side application. And then we have NestJS Platform Express. As I earlier said, this is the default server-side framework for NestJS, which is Express. And then we have reflect metadata. So what is reflect metadata? Okay, so the reflect metadata here is simply, it's an external library that plays a crucial role in enabling the functionality of the decorators. So basically, this is how the reflect metadata works. So NestJS decorators here heavily relies on the NestJS heavily relies on decorators to define functionalities like controllers, services, routes, and dependencies. So these decorators they add metadata, that is additional information to your classes and methods at development time. So this reflex metadata library provides functionalities to attach and retrieve this metadata at runtime. So NestJS utilizes the reflex metadata library to access the information stored by decorators during application execution. Okay, so this might sound weird, but as we move on, we'll understand how this reflect metadata libraries are useful. So you don't really need to understand it, but you just really need to know why this library is here. And then we have the RxJS. So this simply stands for reactive extensions for JavaScript. Okay, so let's get back to the docs and then go back to introduction. We have something here. The earlier mentioned that they use they combine elements of OOP, FP, and then FRP, functional reactive programming. So that is the reason why this RxJS is here. So it simply means reactive extensions for JavaScript. It's a library that allows you to use programming paradigm called a reactive programming. As I mentioned, the functional reactive programming in your JavaScript applications. So in a way of writing code, so reactive programming is basically a way of writing code that focuses on data streams and how data changes over time. So it lets you handle asynchronous operations like waiting for data to be fetched from a server, or like in a more better or elegant way compared to traditional callback-based approaches. So RxJS also introduces the concept of observables. So an observable is like a stream of values that can be emitted over time. You can subscribe to an observable to receive these values as they are emitted. And RxJS also provides operators. So these are functions that you can use to transform or manipulate the values emitted by an observer. So they are similar to functions you might use with arrays like map, filter, reduce, or all of that. So RxJS helps you write cleaner, more maintainable, and more asynchronous code. So it's particularly popular with frameworks like Angular and then NestJS, as you can see. So that basically what NestJS uses this RxJS. So it's just for reactive programming. So moving on, we have dev dependencies here. The Nest clip, which we'll be using to scaffold and then create folders and files in our app. The prettier source map support, super test for testing and APIs, TS loader. We already know what super test is. And then jest is equivalent to Vitest, but then jest, we had jest earlier before Vitest. So, but Vitest is super fast and more faster than jest, but then jest has a wide community support than Vitest. So we have TypeScript, and then we have TS config file and config path. And this is basically to config and path your application and all of that. Okay, so we have just module file extensions like JS, JC, and TS and all of that. So root directory and all of other things. You can go through this package JSON file and try to understand. So here we have .git ignore, so to ignore all of these things. So we don't have to push it to GitHub and then all of that. So we have prettier RC, trailing commas, or then single quote true. So this is enforcing our application to use single quotes and all of that. And then you can add other things like, should I say, okay, cursor offset, or we have semi. If you want to make all these semicolons in your application, or single attribute problem, or JSX single quote, range start, brackets, and all of that, you can configure a lot of things in this prettier RC file. So that's basically it. So moving on, we've introduced Nest. We've scaffolded our app using the Next CLI. So this is our source. In our source folder, we have a source folder with app controller, app modules, and app services. So here is a brief overview. A basic controller with a single route. So controllers, we look at controllers in a bit. So the controller spec is a unit test for the controller. And then the app module is the root module of the application. And then the basic service with a single method. This is basically a basic service. So the main TS is the entry file of the application, which uses the call function next factory to create a next application instance. So this is basically the main TS. And if you open the main TS here, main TS, we have this. So this is basically to bootstrap your app. We have async function with next factory create app module and then app listing port 3000. And you say bootstrap, the application will start. Okay, so if you come over, we have platform specific. So we're using an Express.js platform. So we have to add in the next factory create, we add next Express application before, so that now what they say, when you pass a type to the next factory create method, as in the example below, the app object will have method available exclusively for that specific platform. So however, you don't need to specify the types unless you actually want to access the underlying platform API. Okay. We basically we would like to access the underlying platform API. So let's just add it in the create here. We just add say next Express application like this. Again, it's coming from the right source. Next Express application. Okay, that's great. So now we can come up. We want to start our app. Linting and formatting, just start. We just want to start our app, and then we'll move to, let's say, npm run start dev like this. Okay, starting compilation in watch mode. So our app is compiling, found 0 errors, watching, do. Okay, so our app has compiled. Now, if we visit localhost, this is localhost 3000. You'll see hello world. So the hello world is coming from our source, our app controller. Okay, controller, the service. Okay, the hello world is coming from the service, because if you look at the controller here, the controller is get hello, is saying this is app service dot get hello. So the app service is coming from app service, and then get hello is a function in the app service, which is returning the hello world. So when it returns it again, we have hello world right here. So congratulations to us. We basically written a NestJS application, a basic one. Okay, so next on our list here, we've introduced and then learned about the philosophy. We've also installed NestJS. So moving on, we have, this is powerful. We have the controllers. We have controllers right here. So first of all, we have to understand what controllers are. We already know what controllers are in the MVC model, model view controllers. So we already know what controllers are all about. So here we have a simple definition. Controllers are responsible for handling incoming requests and then returning responses to the client. So if we have a diagram here, we have a client. This is the client. This is the front end of our application. So it sends a HTTP request. And then we have multiple controllers here that handles this request. So this controller may be for a get the note. So it basically handles the notes. You can delete a note, update a note, or create a note. And then this controller will be the user controller, which will log a user, sign up, or sign in a user. So there's further explanation here. A controller's purpose is to receive specific requests for the application. So the routing mechanism controls which controller receive which request. Frequently, each controller has more than one route, and different routes can perform different actions. So in order to create a basic controller, we use classes and decorators. So decorators associate classes with required metadata and then enable Nest to create a routing map. So all this metadata, Nest is able to handle all this metadata using the reflect metadata library. So now we've encountered another word, which are decorators. So what are really decorators in NestJS? So in NestJS, decorators are functions that add metadata, that is additional information. So to classes, properties, or methods. So this metadata is then used by NestJS to configure and manage your application at runtime. So NestJS using the reflect metadata to manage this metadata in your application at runtime. So let's try to explain this a little bit. So decorators provide a concise and declarative way to define application components like controllers, services, routes, dependencies, and more. They improve code readability and then maintainability by separating concerns. By adding metadata, decorators allow NestJS to automatically handle tasks like routing, dependency injection, and then middleware execution. So we have some common use cases like at controller, at get, at post, and all of that. So once we start writing in application, we get to understand this. So here, NestJS has this. Here is we have routing. The next option here is routing. So in the following example, we use the at controller decorator, which is required to define a basic controller. We will specify an optional route and path prefix of cat. Okay, in our case, we'll do some note things. So let's we first of all have to create, let's say, NestJS is NestG controller, NestG controller, and then we give it the name. So we want to create a notes controller. So let's stop our application, clear the terminal, and say nest G controller. Then we say notes like this. Then we hit enter. Okay, so now we have a folder of notes with a controller, note controller, and then we have a note, a unit test for note controller. So next, create all of this for us, so we can just extend our unit test with this. We don't need to go set up anything. Nest already set up everything for us. So we have note controller here. So as you can see, we have this note at controller and then the note. So maybe we started talking about the controller. So the common use cases for decorators. So this is basically a decorator. This at controller here is a decorator for at controller. So at controller decorator marks a class as a NestJS controller, defining a specific path for handling incoming requests. So when you make a get request to notes, it will be forwarded to this controller, but we'll get to understand that in a bit. With other controllers like injectable and inject with get post and all of that. So at get and at post and at put, all of that, they define HTTP method handled by a controller method. So injectable marks a class as a service, making it injectable into other components. We also have at inject. So it injects dependencies into a controller or service constructor. So now that we have a node controller, basically it's time to write something inside of our node controller. Okay, so now we have a node controller and we want to, the first thing here, we want to create route in our controller. So we want to have a get node route, and then basically we have the get node route and any other route like create node. Okay, the first route we have here is it should be let's create the create node. So we say at post, and it will come from NestJS common. So this is basically, we're trying to say this is a post route. So this route is a post route. And then we'll come over here and then we'll say async. We'll define the route. We say, okay, now we say this is a create. We'll give it a name of create node. And then in here, first of all, leave it empty. And then we say return this create node like this. So we have the create node route. Now let's start our application. Say npm run start dev. Okay, so we've started our application. Now, if you come over to Postman, and then you see localhost, let's say 3,000, and then 3,000, not nodes, localhost 3,000, and then you hit enter. We have hello world because we are making a request to the index route, which is the basic services which I showed you, and the follow come service. So if you make a get a request to nodes, we basically get an error. Okay, Nest is showing us an error, status code of 404 not found, cannot get note. Okay, the reason why is because the note route doesn't have a get, the note controller doesn't have a get route. It only has a post route. So if you change it to post and then you make your request, then you get, this creates a note. Okay. Now, if you come over here and change this thing to add another S to this note, let's say note, and you save it. Okay, after your app is done compiling, you come back to Postman and then send this request once more. You get an error until you come over here and add this S and then send this request once more. And then you see this creates a note. So this controller here, you can see what this controller is doing, is creating a route for us. So if you remove this S, now we'll have our normal route. So we can come over here and create another route. So we can create a route. You can see get notes. And then we can say this is let's just leave it like this for now. Return. We say this return all notes like this. So this return all notes. So basically this return all notes. So if you come over to Postman and then change this to a get request, and then you send it once more. Now this is saying not found. Okay. Why? Because we forgot this decorator. We need a decorator here at get. And then this will also come from the NestJS common library. So if you come over here and then send this request once more, and this time around we have this return or note. Okay, so now we have route. So if you come over here and then you come to this place, you add something like ID. Okay, ID like this. And you send this, you come over here and then you send this request. You get an error, except you do something like /1. Then you send this. Okay, an ID we did not specify here. Okay, we have to specify it. Okay, as we move on, we'll understand the ID aspect as well. So this is a get route, this is a post route, and then we can add a delete route. You can see at delete, and then we can see delete note. You can see return this delete a note like this. Okay, we can have another method of at patch or at put. We have at patch, which is coming from the common library as well. And then you see update note like this, and then say return this update note like this. So if you come over here and you change your method to delete, remove the ID, change this method to delete, then you send this request, you have this delete a note, you change it to patch, send it once more, and then you have this update note. And this is awesome. So we don't need to go over abstractions, writing complex logic. We just have to scaffold our app and then get into writing our code. So this is really, really sweet. And okay, so now we've learned about what's that again? We learned about routing, and then we'll move over to request object. So we basically learned about routing. So let's move over to request object. Okay, here is the request object. So we have the request object here. We say handlers often need access to the client request details. So Nest provide access to the request object of the underlying platform Express. So we can access the request object by instructing Nest to inject it by adding at request. Okay, so come over here. We'll come over here and then we say, okay, get node, we say at request. It's coming from Nest command, then we say request. It's of type request from, this should come from Express. Then this is, we make it injectable. So in here we say log request method like this. So now we'll come over and make a get request, and then we send this once more. Then if you open the console, you will see gets. We are logging the request method. So if you want to get access to the request, this is what you will do. And then basically you can say at res, you inject the response as well. And then you say response is of type the response from Express, response from Express as well. Where is Express here? Response like this. Okay, so now TypeScript is complaining that response is declared, but its value is never read. Okay, response, remove this one from here. So what we do is we use ESLint to do away with this error. Come here, and you say disable TypeScript, no unused vars. You do like this. You see this line here, a comment here, and then this error will go away. Okay, so now we've seen how to inject requests, how to access the request method, and also the response method. So this is the response, which is a response any record string any and all of that. So this is basically the request object and the response object. Okay, so moving on, we have the request. So this returns, we'll get to understand all of this. And then moving on, we have all these decorators. We have the request, the rec. We can make it a complete request or rec, a response or rec. I have the next, which is the next function for middleware. We have the session, we have the params, the body, the query headers, IP, and all of that. So we use this, we get to use all of these. Okay, so we have the posts, the resources. These are basically resources. We define an endpoint for this is for get, which we defined here. We defined for get, this is the get, and then we define another one for patch and another one for post, which are resource routes. Okay, now coming over here, we have the route wildcard. So this is basically an advanced stuff. We will not touch that. Well, then we'll have the status code. So if you make a get request to this route, note, if you send this, okay, so application still running. Okay, just stop it. We get, when we make it, the status code here is, where is post now? The status code is 200, which is okay. Now, if you come over here, and then this gets, and then you see at HTTP code, and then you see 500 like this. Now let's make this request once more. Get, okay. Okay, let me just do away with this response here. Compile, send this request once more. So now we're getting a 500 internet server error. We are no longer getting 200 success. We're getting 500 internet server error. Our request is successful, but then we're getting a 500 internet server error just because we specified our HTTP code to be 500 and not 200. You can change this to 201, which is created. And then if you make, oops, with postman. If you make this request once more, you will have 201 created here. Okay, so that's basically that. Okay, so moving on, we have the headers. Now you can specify headers. Now, if you come over to Postman here, you have headers. And then you have content length, content type of this content length. Okay, and dates. Okay, we can change, basically, we can change the content type to be, let's come over here and then say we have at headers. Header, not headers, header. And then we can say content type. Is this columns or okay? This should be a comma. Then we say application JSON. Application JSON. So if you come over here and then we'll make this request once more. And then this time around, we don't have, what were we having? Let's comment this out and then see what we were having earlier. If you comment this out and then you make this request, if you make this request, you can see you're having text/HTML. You are serving HTML from the server. By the time you add, your content type should be application JSON. You come over here and then if you send this request once more, you see that you are now having the content type of application JSON. And this is sweet. Okay. So moving on, we've seen how to set our content type as well. I can say cache control to be none. This is for caching and then all of that. We have the redirect. So you can make that request and then redirect to this route. We don't want to redirect. You can see how to redirect. You use the redirect directive here and then pass in the URL you want to redirect to, and then the redirect status code. We have the 302 of found and then 301 of permanent. I think it's permanent. Okay, so we also have the query at query, and then we have the redirect. So if here, basically what they are doing is they are checking if the version is equal to 5, and then they are redirecting to this URL. Okay, so we have the route parameters. This is where I wanted to get to. The route parameters. Okay, so now if you come over here, so we define another resource. So this one will be get note, and then we'll say this is basically get notes, and then here will be at get. So at get we take an ID param. So we want to get a note. We want to get a note by ID. So if you come over here, we say add params, and then we have params any, and then we have the string. So if you come over here, we've defined another one. Yeah, Israel, you can go ahead.
Okay, yes, please. I need to ask. I don't know. I'm not sure I got that part of the HTTP code that I did something there. Can I see the code? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You mean you want to see the code in Postman?
VS Code, in VS Code.
You want to see them appear in Postman, right?
No, VS Code.
Okay, VS Code. You mean this?
Yes. What's that? Yes, that was, I can't remember what you said. Is that like the status code or what?
Code. You want to set the return, like the HTTP code to be returned in the response. So once you set this, now if I comment this out and then you make this request, if you make this request, can you see this? Status code is 200. Okay, can you see this?
Okay.
Now, if I come back here and then change this, I want the status code to be returned. The status code I want this response. I want in this response is 201. I've set this to 201 now. So if I come over here and then make this request once more, then I can see that here now the status code is 201, not more 200. Okay. So moving on, we have so I want to get a note by ID. So I will say at param, and then I will say, okay, what do we have here? At params. So I will say params any, and then I'm returning a string. So params ID. So I can basically say param, and then I will say it's of type any, and then we'll say return return this this node has an ID of ID like this. Okay, ID of param ID. Okay, now let's go over to this place, and then you can even see, okay, let's come over here and then say /1. Now this is a get request. So let's come to body. Now I say this node has an ID of 1. So you don't have to go over doing all, okay, get this one, get that one. You just, oh, next is sweet. So this is basically it. Then you can, if you don't want to do that, you can basically come here and then destructure the param as well. You can say, okay, param of ID and the IDs of number or string and all of that. So if you come over here and then see param ID, and then you see ID of type string. Okay, ID. Yes. So you have ID and ID is of type string. So if you come over here, oops, where's postman? And then you send this request once more, you have this node has an ID of 1. Okay, so now this is basically how we can use request parameters. So moving on, we have subdomain routing, and this is basically not okay. We've learned about request object resources, status code, headers, redirection, route parameters, and then asynchronicity. We have the request payload module where, okay, let's learn about, we have learned about the route parameters. Now we learn about synchronicity or whatsoever it is called. So I added an async keyword here. So you come over here and say, okay, this is basically a promise. This will return a promise, and this promise will resolve to a string. Okay, so you can come over here and then say, okay, this is a promise, and then this return statement here can be an await of an await. So you come over here, if this can resolve to a string, so this is basically a synchronicity and all of that. So if this is an asynchronous method, you add an async keyword and then say promise. But if it is not async, let's say this one is a string, and then say this, okay, this one is returning a string, and it's not asynchronous. So this is basically it. Okay, so moving on, we've defined all of that, and then this is asynchronicity. Okay, get, async, promise, any, okay, and then all of that. We also have the request and payload. Okay, so the request payload, we have DTO. A DTO here, as you can see, is basically data transfer object. So let's complete the structure of our application. So inside of this nodes, okay, why are we getting this red listing here? In the nodes controller. Okay, let's remove the rest. Okay, we don't need it. Okay, so now app is happy, and then we can remove this line as well. So if you come over here, we'll have create a folder of interfaces, and then we create another folder of DTO, and I think that's all. So inside of DTO, we'll see we create a file of create nodes.dto.ts, and then inside of this place we say export class create node dts like this, and then we say read only id of type string, read only what am I doing? So we want to create a DTO for creating nodes. Okay, so this is basically a class that we can use to create notes. Okay, read only DTO. This is supposed to be, I think, a colon, and then let's say number, and then we say read only read only title. A note we have a title. The title of the of type string, and then the note we also have a description as well. Create note DTS here. Create note DTS. Thank you, Israel. Then we have read only description of type string as well. So we've already exported this. Now, as you can see, if you come over here, you can see this is created in the DTS. That you can bring it over here if you want to create. This is the body. This is a post request and it's expecting a body. So if you come over here, in order to create a note, you come over here and then you say, okay, at body, this is coming from next command, and you say create note DTO, and then you say create note DTS like this. Okay, and then you come over here. So later on, we'll use this to create a note. We use it to create in order to avoid errors. Okay, so now that we've declared this, what next do we have? We have, okay, this for them, not for us. So getting up and running, we have to include the controller in our app. So we'll go to our app module TS, and then we'll add this controller in order to be able to access it in our app. So we'll come to app. Okay, it's already added automatically. Controller, we'll have the app controller and then the note controller. So we can basically remove this app controller. We don't really need it. And then remove it from here. We have our app controller. This app controller here is a kind of, let's just delete it. You can come over here and delete the app controller. So now we only have this. So our app, we have the notes controller and it's in the module. So I believe we'll talk about modules as well. So moving on. Okay, we have also the library specific approach. With Express.js. So we talk about the response, and then instead of if you come over to the notes controller, instead of saying HTTP status code, you can basically do away with that. And then we have the request, and then we can also add at rest as we added earlier. The next command, and then we say this is the response, like this. Response. Response, which is coming from outside. Maybe I'm not getting it right. Outside, like this. Okay. So now we have response, which is coming from Express. So instead of doing this, you can see rest does okay. This is response dot status of page TTP status dot let's say okay. HTTP status okay dot send. Then you can say get all notes like this. Okay, so this is no longer returning an void or any return field. Okay, let's say void. Okay, now we are using the Express specific approach. We are no longer using the Nest inbuilt approach. Now we're using the Express specific approach. So now we're saying response status. We can even change this to res as we normally do. Say rec, and then it's coming and we say rec res. Come over here and say res. Okay, so now if you make this request once more, this get request, remove the ID, and then you make this request. Okay, we have get all nodes and the status code is 200. So if you change the status code here to HTTP status code created or conflict, okay, let's say conflict, and then you send this request once more, you send this request, and then we have 409 conflicts, get or not. Okay, so this is how to use this express specific. Now you can opt in to use the express method of doing things instead of using the nest. So this is very, very useful. Nest is powerful. If
Oh, guys.
okay, okay, so we're talking about using an express way of doing things. So this is basically how to do things with express. So you can use the send, the end, or the JSON. Now you can come over here, or if you don't want to do this send of a thing, you can see JSON. JSON. You can see name is next like this. Okay, so if you make this request once more, what you have here is a name next. Okay, so that is basically how controllers work and how you can use Nest built-in controllers with Nest way of doing things, or you can opt into Express way of doing things. And if you're using Fastify, you can configure Fastify to also work as if you are using Express with Nest, or if you want to use it Fastify, you can go ahead and do that. Okay, so moving on, we have providers. So what exactly are providers? So if you come over to Nest, we'll move over to providers. So providers are a fundamental concept in Nest. So many of the basic Nest classes may be treated as a provider. That is the services, the repositories, the factories, helpers, and so on can be treated as providers. So the main idea of a provider is that it can be injected as a dependency. This means objects can be created. Objects can create various relationships with each other, and the function of wiring up these objects can largely be delegated to the Nest runtime system. So let's assume we have a controller here. We have a component, a factory component. These are all providers. So in the previous chapter, we built a simple node controller. They are building a CAS controller while we're building a node controller. The controller should handle HTTP requests and then delegate more complex tasks to providers. So providers are plain JavaScript classes that are declared as providers in a module. So providers, in mentioning providers, they mention services. So what are services? So first of all, we start with services. We create a simple service. So this service will be responsible for data storage and retrieval and designed to be used by the node controller. So it's a good candidate to be defined as a provider. Okay, so now we create the node service. So now before we create the node service, we'll go back to our interfaces. Okay, it's a code in our interfaces, and then we create something like node.interface.ts. And inside of this, we say export interface of nodes. And then we have the ID, which is of type number. We have title of type string, and then we have description of type also string, like this. Okay, so now that I've created and exported the node interface in the node.interface.ts, now we have a DTO of create node. We've created a DTS, a DTO, and then interfaces. We've also created a node interface. So it's time to import, and then we also need to create a basic service. So in order to create a service, you just have to say NestJ service nodes. So come over here, stop our app, clear the terminal, and then we say NestJ service nodes, like this. And then you hit enter. Then the node service is basically created, and also the test. This test, the spec, the node service spec.ts is also created that you can use to test your node service. So if you open the node service, you can see that it is empty and it is injectable. That means you can inject this node service. We already discussed about injectable. This node service is injectable. Now, if you come over here, how is it created? So now we have the private read-only cat. Okay, so we want to use the cat interface here. So we'll create a cat. Now we don't have a database. The reason why we're creating this in this class is to store our notes and all of that. So we don't have a database. So we'll come over to this class, and then we'll say private. It is private and it is read only. Then we'll say note. And this note want to use the note interface. So we say the note. So now the note will come from note interface. So it is not a single note. If you say equal to an empty array, you get an error. So you get an error. Note is declared read only this with private read only. The type undefined is missing the following properties, note ID. The reason why we're getting this error is because note here is a single item. So we want to make it an array of notes like this. An array of notes. So we have notes, an array of notes is equal to an empty. If you hover over this, you have notes. If you hover over note, you have this note.service. So node service.notes, because it's actually inside of this. Now we have different methods. If you open the node controller, we have the get node and then the create node. So now we have to create services that will be responsible for creating nodes and then getting also our nodes. So now the first thing we need to do is in our nodes we have an empty array. Let's come over here and then add something in our nodes. Let's say an object with an ID of 1. Then title will be of first node, and then description will be of a second node. Okay, now we can basically quickly copy this and then bring it down here and then add 2. Then say second node. Oh, this one is first node. The description should be first node description, and this one should be second node description, like this. Okay, so now we have two nodes. So we now have to implement a service to get our node. So we just come over here and then we see get node. This is a method in this class, get node, and then we see method. So it has something like this. This is a method. What am I doing? Okay. Then we see return this get notes. Like this. So we want to return the note. You know, this note belongs to this class. So when you're saying this is reference to the instance of the class being created. So this is referencing this. So basically, how do we use this? Now it's time to use this service in our controller. So how do we use this service in our controller? So we'll basically go back to our node controller and then use that service to get the notes in our controller. So now let's remove this header. Let's remove all the gibberish we've got in here. Let's remove every other thing in here because we don't need those. We want to use the inbuilt nest. We don't want to use express method. So let's remove this one as well and then do away with this. So this is get notes. We return all our notes. But before we do that, we'll have to inject the node service. Now, if you look at the node service, it is injectable. So this means we can inject this node service in another class. So this is where the dependency injection comes in. So this node controller will depend on the node service. So we are injecting the node service into the node controller. So if you come over to the node controller, now we'll create a constructor. You say constructor. Okay, this will be, let's leave it an empty constructor for now. So we have this empty constructor. So inside of this empty constructor, this is where we'll bring in our node service. So we'll say this is a private, and then we'll make it also a read only. And then inside there we'll see node service. And then we'll say it is the node service. Look at the node service coming from the node service here. Now, if you save this error goes away. Let's just do away with this express stuff that is making our code ugly, and ugly. Okay, let's just do away with that. And then in here, so now let's just add this comment back so that we don't get these errors. Okay, so now we can use this node service. Now, if you look at this node service, we've injected the node service in our node controller. So we can use it to create, so what this function is returning is basically we can now use the node interface, because the reason why we created it, we can reuse it in multiple places, returning an array of nodes. So this one is saying a function that is neither, okay, because we are not returning anything. That's why it's throwing an error. Now, if you say return, this error will go away because we are intending to return something. So we have a method. If you say this, they will say node service. So if you look at the node service here, this node service has a method of get nodes. So we can just see this node service dot, then you see the get node and then you call it. Simple. Can you see how sweet this is? You just come over here to your get nodes. You already have a node service that will take care of creating the node here. This node, the app service. We should basically delete this app service here. Okay, if you come over, okay, then app module, we can also remove the app service and then remove this app service here. And you can see it's automatically included in the providers. The node service is automatically included in the providers. And if you look at the definition of providers here, it basically says providers are fundamental concepts. The main idea of provider is can be injected as a dependency. This means object can create various relationships with each other and then function of what do. So this is basically a provider. The node service is a provider because it can be injected. That's the reason why we are injecting it here and then using it to get nodes. So we have this method that gets nodes. We don't really know the node controller is not aware of how the node service is getting the nodes, but all it's doing is calling the get nodes to get its nodes. And then this is returning. So if you run our app, npm run start dev, after compilation, we'll come over here and then send this request. Kaboom! We have our two nodes. Can you see how easy that is with NestJS? With just few lines of code and then you've accomplished what you want. Okay. So now that we've seen how this is and how simple this is, we can basically come over here in our node service and then add another method. And inside of this method, we can call this one create nodes. You can see create nodes. And the create node here is basically taking an input. We send note, the node that will be created. So we'll have note. Then we have this. This is the note. The interface that we'll use is the note interface because the incoming note object will be of this. It will have an ID, a title, and a description. So we want to use this interface to create note. So let's import this. The note, I think it's already imported. Okay. Now in here, we want to create in our note. So we'll say this note, and then we'll say push note. We want to just add this incoming note to, because we are aware now, we are sure that this incoming note is of this structure, this interface that we've defined here, which has an ID, title, and a description. So we just take it and then we'll add it to this note right over here. So coming back to the controllers, how do we make use of this function in the service? So coming back to the controllers, we will just see we want to create a note. So how do we create this note? Now we'll basically grab the body. We've already defined this. Okay, we have the body, which is a create node DTO. And then the create node DTO also has the same structure. If you open this, it also has the same structure as the interface. So the interface has an ID of a number, title string, description string, and then the create node DTO has a read-only ID of number, read-only title of string, and then read-only description of also string. So if you come to controllers, and here you want to create a note. So if you want to create a note, we already have the body and then the create note DTO, create note DTS here. So what we will say is this object we are expecting here has a structure of an ID, a title, and a string. So what we will do here, we'll say this dot node service. We already know that the node service has a create node method. So we'll say this node service dot create node, and then we pass in the create node DTO, and then that's all. So this is no longer returning a promise of a string; it's returning a promise of void, because after creating the node, it is not returning the node. This is not even a promise because we can also return this async, but we can also leave it for reference purposes. So this will now create a node. So let's come over here and then change this method to, okay, let's add another one here. Let me see, localhost nodes, and then change this method to post, and then come to body. This body is already raw, and then we already have a JSON. So inside of this JSON, you can see ID is of 1. Title, here we say third node, and then the description here, say we have third node description like this. Oops, I don't want to save it. Okay, let me just bring this down. This should be a string like this. Okay, so now if we send this request, Okay, we don't have any response, but then we have a 201, which is created. Now, if you come over here and then send this request, now we have 3 items. Oops, we have a third node, but then we are sending an ID of 1 instead of 3. Okay, let's change it to 3, and then we'll send this request once more, and then the note is created. Then if you come over here, send this, we have 1 first note, second note, third note, and then this should have an ID of 3, which is third note. We're not checking if the ID exists, we're just creating it. So that's the reason why we're having duplicates. And we have ID of 3 and this. So as you can see, can you see how simple this is? You can even get a note by ID. Then you can come over here in the node service and then get in the get node. That is basically it. So this is how we can create a service and then use it in the controllers to do all of this. So we're not persisting this, and then on the time immediately we stop and start our application, we'll only have 2 nodes in our node. This is basically our database. Okay, so now we've understood what a service is, how we can inject and then use all of this. So we have this card and then get and all of that. We have an interface. They have an interface of card. We have an interface of note. Okay, create note. Okay, Israel, you want me to open the create note service? So this is basically testing if it is defined. So if you run test, this test will pass because this node service is defined. But by the time you delete this file, this test will fail because it is not defined. And don't worry, by the time you scaffold this, you'll be able to see this. This is a test case. It has just a single test in it. And then it has a before any test, each test we run, this function will be called and all of that. Yes, the test is created automatically. By the time you create this, it is created automatically. That is Nest for you. Everything is being created automatically. So you can extend this test all by yourself. But then the test, the node that service.spec.ts is created automatically for you. Okay. So moving on, we have, what next do we have? Okay. We have services, we've discussed services in providers, and then we've also discussed dependency injection. So if you've been trying to understand this DI and you really did not understand, we've seen a simple example of DI, dependency injection. We created a service and then we made it injectable. So we injected it in the node controller. So the node controller now depends on the node service. That is a dependency is now created. Once something depends on another one, a dependency is created. So the node controller depends on the node service and the dependency is created. So dependency injection, now once the node controller depends on the node service, and then the node service is injected in the node controller, so it depends on it. That is a dependency injection basically. So you can use that as a reference to typically always try to remember what dependency injection is and all of that. Okay, so moving on, we have modules. These are basically slightly different from the node modules we've been using. We have modules, we have feature modules, we have shared modules, we have module respecting, and we have dependency injection in modules as well. Okay, so if we come over to we head over to modules, and under modules we have the definition. So a module is a class annotated with @module decorator. So the @module decorator provides metadata that Nest makes use of to organize application structure. And you know what handles the metadata? The reflect metadata library in Nest is used to handle all of this. So let's assume we have an application module. So we have users module, others module, and chat module. So we have a feature module 1 and then feature module 2. Then we also have feature module 3. So this is basically how it is organized. So each application has at least one module, the root module. So the root module is the starting point Nest uses to build the application graph. So the internet data structure Nest uses to resolve module and provider relationships and dependencies. So while very small applications may theoretically have just the root module, this is not the typical case. We can want to emphasize on the modules as strongly recommended as an effective way to organize your components. So this is too much grammar. So coming over here, we just practicalize everything. So you can go over to the docs. I'm using the docs so you can also learn to work with the docs. And then what is here, I'm just using the docs to directly give us examples of, we're referencing the docs with the cat app they built, but then we're building a notes app so we can get a basic example of what Nest is all about and how we can effectively use it. So coming here, we have the providers. The providers that in the module, if you open this module here, and app module here, we have the imports, we have the controllers, and then we providers. Then basically you can see in the provider, we have the node service, which we learn what providers are, and then we know what the reason why the node service is here. And then we also have the controllers. So the node controller here, we've imported it in the app modules here, so the app can get access to it, and then basically, and all of that. So if you remove this here and save your application, and it still compiles, you come over here and then send this request, and then you can see cannot get this because the node controller is not in the app module. This is the root module. So if you include it and save it, okay, we'll come over here and then send this request once more, and then our application is back up. That's great. So coming over here, we'll have the providers that will be instantiated by the Nest injector, and then that may be shared at least across this module. So this here, these providers, the providers here, they are the ones that will be instantiated at least at this module level, and then be shared across this module as well. They will also have controllers, the set of controllers defined in this module, which have to be instantiated. We have import, the list of imported modules that export the providers which are required on this module. And then we have export, the subset of providers that are provided by this module and should be available in other modules which import this module. So you can use either the provider itself or just its token. So we have, don't worry about all of this. We'll practicalize it and we'll get to understand what import, export are in this module level and all of that. So we have the feature module. So the cat controller and cat service belong to the same application domain. As are closely related, it makes sense to move them into a feature in a feature module. So a feature module simply organizes code relevant for a specific feature. Okay, so what we do now is, if you check in our notes, we don't have any module. So imagine our application is a very large application that have different services, the nodes, the user. Okay, let's say it's an e-commerce app that has the order, the market, the user, and all of that. So the checkout as well. So you can have the checkout user and all of that. So in here we can have note module.ts, note module ts. Now, if you come, we can come over here and then let's just copy everything here. No, we don't have to. I think we don't even need to copy anything because this is a simple case. We just come over here and say at module, which is from next common. And then in here, we'll say, what do we need inside of this module? We need the controllers and the providers. The export class, we say export class. Then we see we have the providers, and then we have the node service, the provider. We have the controllers as well. Controllers, we have the node controller. And then we see export. What are we exporting? In here, we are exporting this module by giving it a name. And then the nodes, then the name here will say the node module, like this. Then we save this. So now that we've declared this, we will need to come in here in the app module, and this no longer will be using the node controller and then the node service. So how would that work then? So if you come over to the app module, then you just import the Node module directly without importing the Node controller and then the Node service. So as you can see here, we just remove the controllers and the service, and then you see Node module, and it's simple. And then do away with this and this. So now in the root module, you just have to import this Node module in the root module. So if you have a user module, you can just come over here and then import the user module here as well. And then your app will be well organized. So if you come over here and then send this request once more, our app is still working as expected. That is a feature module. So now we've looked at a feature module. So now look at the structure of our app. We have an app module and the main tiers. We also have the notes. Inside of the notes, we have DTO, we have interfaces. So we have create notes DTO tiers, and then we have note interface tiers. We have notes controller, notes module, and note service. So this is great. And if you come over here, we have this is what we have: DTO interfaces, so we have note controller, note module, and note service with the test and test files along with those things. Okay, that's basically it for modules. And then we have also shared modules. So in Nest, modules are singletons. Okay, I'm not going to talk about singletons. I think you should go check out what singletons are. We discussed about it when we're discussing classes and then constructor functions in our JavaScript class, in our previous one of our previous classes in JavaScript. So you can basically just go check that out. So in a singleton, the modules are singletons by default, and those you can share them the same instance of any provider between multiple modules. So a singleton is instantiated just once. So that instance can be shared across. You just instantiate it once and can share that instance. That's basically a singleton. You can go check that out. So this is a shared module. So we have a users module, the others module, and the chat module. So this module can be shared across all these modules. You can use the user module, the others module, or the chat module. So every module is automatically a shared module. Once created, it can be reused by any modules. So let's imagine that we want to share an instance of the, let's say the node service between several other modules. So in order to do that, we first need to export the blah, 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 and all of that. So if you come to the node module here, if you come to the node module, now we have export. So why are we exporting this? Why are we exporting the node service? Okay, we are exporting the node service because probably we may need it in the user. Okay, so here we have node. So we have another, let's say a user controller or user service or user module. Let's say we have a user service or user controller or user module that will need this node service. That is the reason why we're exporting it. And once exported here, it can be accessible in that user module or user service as stated here. As you can see, between several other modules. So in order to do that, we first need to export the cat, blah, 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 and then in the export array as shown here. So once you export it, it can then be accessed in the other. So we have module re-exporting. So now that we've exported that we can also have a common module or this, that. So inside of a module, you can re-export that module inside. It's simply importing it and then re-exporting it. So if you create another module, you import the note module and then re-export that note module so it can be reused somewhere else. So we have dependency injection. So a module class can inject providers as well for config. This is just for configuration purposes, as they mentioned, and we're not going to be doing this. So we have module this. So you have a cat module here. Then you can see private cat module service. So you can inject the note module inside of. If you come over here, we have the node service. This node service, you can come over here and then inject it in here inside it as well. So that by the time you want to use this node module inside of another module, you can basically access this node service along with it. So if you inject it, okay, let's come over to this and then basically copy this thing. Then bring it to the node module here and then inject it here. Okay, so now we have access to this thing here, this node module. So if you create another user, you have another user, let's say user service that needs this node module. So you can basically access the create nodes, get nodes, and all of that are also inside of this service, because you've injected it in here inside of this module, the node module here. This node service is being injected inside of this node module, so you can access it somewhere else and then call the node service to create and all of that. Or this is how basically this works. So once injected, and then you access this node module inside of another service, you can call this node service without knowing what it's doing. And then if you try to call this node service, say node service. Okay, this is basically a class, and I will need to have a method. Okay, so this node service. Okay, let's see method. I don't want to do that. Okay, if you have a method in here that needs to do something or need to create a node, you can just call this node service, and then the node service is now inside of the node module, and then you can access that and then get to use it effectively. Okay, we also have global modules. If you want to make a module global, if you don't import and then re-export modules, if you don't export this module here, you cannot access it in another service like the users or something else. So if you want to make it global, you can just say at global. You can call it at global here, and then it can be accessible globally in your app. But it's not recommended anyways. Then dynamic modules as well. You have dynamic modules. You have this is a dynamic module, create database providers, module database, and then you say for root entities optional. And this is basically how to create a dynamic module. You can go over there and look at dynamic modules and all of that. So next, we've learned modules, the feature module, the shared modules, and then module re-exporting. We've also learned that how you can import and then re-export a module. And then we've also seen dependency injection with modules. That is basically, and let me make this clear. If you don't understand anything as well, trying to understand what NestJS is all about, if there's anything you don't understand, you should just call my attention, and then I will come back and explain everything. So now we've understood module re-exporting and then dependency injection as well. So moving on, we have the middleware. So middleware here is basically how we've been creating middleware in our Express application. I already know what middlewares are, so I'm not going to be explaining what a middleware is. So we'll just jump into creating middleware and then using it in our application. So what is a middleware? A middleware, okay. Since I've already included in our slide, let's just look at what a middleware is. Middleware. So middleware is a function which is called before the route handler. So middleware functions have access to the request and response objects and the next middleware function in the application request to response cycle. So the next middleware function is commonly denoted by a variable named next. So we have a client-side application making a request to our own server-side app, and then we have a middleware that will grab that request, interpret the request. If there is anything that the middleware needs to do, it will act on that and then free the request to the route handler to take care of the request. Okay, so now that we've seen that, we also learn how to create middleware. So in order to create a middleware, we'll come to our nodes. So we want this middleware to be specific to this node. So we'll come over, we'll create another folder, and then we'll say middlewares like this. And inside of this, we'll just create a simple logger middleware. We'll say logger.middleware.ts. Okay, so how do we create a middleware in NestJS? So we'll inject this, so we have to make it injectable as well. Say export class. Let me say this is basically a logger middleware like this, a logger middleware. So if you come over to Nest docs, you can see how they've created this as well. So let's just, in order not to waste our time, let's just copy this, bring it over here, and then just explain what it's all about. Paste it. So this implements Nest middleware. So this is basically an interface in it's a Nest middleware. So this has to satisfy this. So it implement this. It's using this interface to do all of this. So now it's a console.log request. Okay, and then you can see if you console.log, you can say request method like this, comma, and then you can say request as well. So inside of this, so we can just go back and then use our middleware. It depends on where you want to use your middleware. So if you come over here they say dependency injection. Nest middleware also fully supports dependency injection. Just as with providers and controllers, they are able to inject dependencies that are available within the same module as usual. This is done through the constructor. Okay. Now we want to apply our middleware. So if we want to apply our middleware, we'll come to the app module, and then we'll see export app module, implement Nest module. So let's come over here, app module. Then we'll say implement Nest module like this. Then we'll have a constructor. So let's leave the constructor empty for now. So this app module to implement interface app module is required type. Okay, it's there. And if you come over here, we have, okay, it's not the constructor, it's a configure consumer, middleware consumer. So the consumer here should be the middleware consumer. This is a consumer, right? Configure. Oops, what am I doing? Well, first of all, configure the consumer. Configure. Let's say consumer is the middleware consumer, like this. And then we'll open this up like this. Okay. And then we're getting an error here saying consumer, but the value is never read. It's defined, but the value is never read. Okay, so now let's go ahead and then complete our middleware implementation. So now we'll say consumer.apply. Consumer apply. So what do you want to apply? You want to apply the logger middleware coming from that middleware. And then for which route? We're saying for which route? We're saying for route. For route note class equals class app module implement Nest module. Okay, we're getting this error here. App module type. Okay, what's this error for? Configure is declared here. Okay, let's check here. Apply logger middleware for routes, middleware routes. Nest module. Okay. This is configure, not configure. Configure like this. Okay. So now the error is gone. Okay, so now if you come over here and then make a request to get our note. Okay, we've gotten our notes, but here we see get. The method is get, and then the request will be logged in the middleware. So we are logging the request method and then this request as well. So if you come here, you have the get here. But if you come over here in our, and then you say the route is for, you can configure this thing for a specific route. You can configure it for specific route. And then if you come over to the docs also, you can see that you can configure this for specific route. You can pass it as an object. You can say for route, then make it an object. And then you see path. The path is nodes, and the method is, let's just do a, okay, request method get. You can see a method is a request method. You can see, okay, let's say our own is, let's say post, save it. And then let's come over here once more and then make this request using postman. Make the request. This time around, if you come over here, we don't see the log in the middleware. Inside this middleware, there's a request method, and then there's a request, but then we do not see anything here. So, but if you go back to Postman, then try to add a note. Let's add this note. And then we've added a note. If you open you see that post, the request, the method is post, and this request we also logged. This one, the request method is post, and then this request. So that is how we're configuring our middleware. We're only configuring it to take part in this, the note, the route should be the note, and the method should be, if you send a post request, our middleware should capture the request and they act upon it. But we don't want to intercept requests that are not, that does not have the method of post. We only want to intercept requests that have the method of post. We only want to intercept post request. We don't need get, patch, or delete, only post. So this how to define a middleware, apply middleware, then exclude routes. Okay, so we can basically come over here and let's see how we can exclude this. These are white cards. Then how to consume, and then excluding routes. You can see this and that, and then you can exclude, you can match any other route, but then exclude one. So you can see for routes, if you come over here, you can see that inside apply.exclude.for route cat controller. Okay, now if you come over here, we have .exclude, then we have an object. We have, inside of this object, you can see that we have the path and the method. So the path here, let's exclude the, should I see, and then the method here, request method, post. Let's exclude this one. Then you say for routes, and then you see node controller like this. Okay, so now we are including every other route, but we're excluding this one. Basically we're excluding the node route, but excluding the request with the method of post. So this time around, if you try to create, now try to create a node, you don't see any logs here. But if you come over and then make a get request to get nodes, now if you come, okay, now we have 3 nodes. If you come here, then you see your middleware acting on this get request. So this is basically how to configure your middleware, how to exclude route and then include route and then all of that. Okay, we've seen how to exclude route and then configure our middleware as well. So we also have functional middleware. So functional middleware is basically changing your, we have multiple middlewares, global middleware. Let's look at the functional middleware first. If you come over here, you can see this is basically how to define a middleware in Express. So we can just copy this, come over here. In our middleware, do away with everything. Instead of making it injectable, we don't want to make it injectable. We're just using our Express old way of doing things. So if you save this one here, and then we say, okay, let's leave it as request, and then we'll come over here, remove this logger middleware, and then just say logger, because the name of the function is logger. Then come over here and then remove this one as well, save your file, Then if you come to Postman, send this request. Okay, we have this. And then in here we have request. Okay, so this is basically how we can make our middleware functional. So moving on, we also have multiple, Docker, I didn't open this. Okay, so let's see how we can declare multiple middlewares. While multiple middlewares, we can say consumer apply multiple middleware. We have the calls, the helmet, the logger, and then for routes, you can also configure the route. So this will be done when we start building our notes, our KC notes. So we can apply helmets and calls on all of that for production. So we have the global middleware. So if you want to use the middleware, you want you to make it global, you can come to the main TS here. In our main TS, then we can say app use logger, like this. App use logger, and then you come to app module, and then you just remove this implement of a thing, remove the configure, and then do away with all of these things. Request method type, save your file, remove the middleware consumer as well, like this. Okay, so now our middleware is global. Every route will be able to access our logger middleware. So if you come here and then send this request once more, if you come down here, you see requests. So we've made our middleware global. This basically is, so now we can we can close all our files. And then we've learned about middleware, and then moving on, we have exception filters. So I don't think we'll give any examples on this. We'll just move over to the docs and then see what exception filters. These are basically things we've been using. So if you move on to exception filters, so we're not going to read in all of that. So here you can do this and then throw a new HTTP exception of forbidden, HTTP status code of forbidden. So basically, Nest, if you like in here, if you come over here and then say note or say note KJ and then send this request, you see an error because they've already made this and then this is a not found error. Everything is configured, so we cannot get this route all over here, note KG. So everything is configured for us. But then if you want to make it, you can make it, you can make a custom error message and error status as well. So you can do this try catch. You can include a try catch in the find all or in the get note. And then if there's an error while trying to get note, you throw this error, the status code should be status code forbidden, and then the error is this is a custom message and all of that. So this is what the person is getting. Status code is 403, which is forbidden, and error is this is a custom message. So this is basically exception filters and how you can make you can even make a class, a custom class, forbidden exception, extend HTTP exception. And then you can say the super is forbidden and the status code is a forbidden. If you come in, you can just throw new forbidden exception. And that's all. So we have other built-in HTTP exceptions here. We have the bad request exception, the unauthorized exception, the not found exception, the forbidden exception, the not acceptable, and then a whole lot of them. So you can just check the docs and then see how to make your own exceptions. So we'll be making our exceptions when we start building our KC notes, but not for now. This is just a basic understanding of all of this. So basically, we've seen how we can, what exception filters are. We don't need to explain that. We've seen how we can throw standard exception and then custom exceptions. By throwing standard exception, we don't need to configure anything, but then by throwing standard exception, we need to configure all of those on our own. Okay, so in today's class, we've introduced NestJS, we've configured NestJS, and then we've learned about controllers, services, and modules, and also middlewares, how we can configure functional middlewares in NestJS, and then let me say class middleware as well, like this. Okay. So how we can make a middleware injectable and then all of that, all of those things. So this is basically NestJS. As you can see, we have our nodes, we have our DTO, our interface, and everything is looking clean. Okay, we have also our tests. In our test, this is the spec. And then inside the spec, we are testing the index route. Expect if you run the test, it will fail because we've changed it. And it gets JSON and all of them. They've configured the test in JSON and boom, everything is next. Everything is next. And we can see npm run links. And then yes, link will link the whole of our app. Okay, so it's linking everything. You can see npm run formats. Okay, so that's formatted all of our files and everything is under control. This is sweet. So now we can just npm run build. Now if you run build, application is being packaged. So that build directory is being deleted. So this is a new one, the dist. You can open this and we have this, all of these things. We have the notes and then everything is JS, no more TS. Everything is JavaScript, and then this is ES5, basically. This is ES5. So our application is now deployable. We can deploy it in production environment and then sweet. So basically we learned NestJS today and we've come to the end of today's class. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask.